Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Jordan Webster, and I work in workforce development and government affairs for the Kansas City Home Builders Association. And we are also a member of the Northland Education and Business Alliance, or NEBA for short. NEBA is a network of education and business organizations in Clay and Platte counties where vision is to promote and provide business-driven educational opportunities for all of you, our next generation of business leaders. I will be your host for this session, and we have one other NEBA member working with me, Courtney Reyes, and she is also with the Kansas City Home Builders Association. Just a few quick notes before we get started. This session will run for 40 minutes with a hard stop at 10:40. Our industry experts will begin sharing their professional history and insight, but we definitely want this to feel more like a conversation. So please, throughout the session, put questions in the Q&A, and we will get to those. We'll definitely interject some questions during the program, and then hopefully we can get all of the questions finished towards the end. At the bottom of your screen, in case you don't see it, that's where that feature is. We encourage you to use the space. And sorry, I went off a little bit. At the end of the session, you'll be asked to fill out a quick survey. Please give us your feedback so we can make this event better in the future. And last but not least, the session will be recorded and will be available in the near future. All right, Aimee, would you like to kick us off?
Sure, absolutely. I'm Aimee Gray. I'm the owner of A3G Architects, which is located in Liberty, Missouri. I've been practicing architecture for, about 21 years now. And I started my own company about 10 years ago after working for two medium-sized firms in Kansas City. I have a master's in architecture from Andrews University, which is in the state of Michigan, but I grew up in St. Joe, Missouri. And I've had my practice either in Parkville or here in Liberty for the last 10 years. We have 4 full-time staffers here at the office. We are an all-female firm with a variety of architects and interior designers. And we are generalists in the sense that we work on all types of projects, from single-family residential to tenant finish to new commercial work, some planning along the way and some historic projects along the way as well. I'm not sure the full bio that you guys are looking for today, so that's just a little bit about me, and then I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Aimee. We'll move on. Michelle, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Michelle Chavey, and this is actually going to be really great because I think Aimee and I have maybe totally different experiences. So this will be a good sort of two sides of a conversation to share. I am a partner at Hollis Miller Architects. We are in downtown Kansas City, Missouri in the Crossroads, and then we have another office in Castle Rock, Colorado. We are a fairly large firm. We're about 110 people, and I have been there my whole career. So I graduated from K-State with an architecture degree in 2005. So I've been at Hollis Miller for 15 years and have moved my way from project architect all the way through the ranks, and now I'm an owner. And I actually have a very specialized role. So Hollis & Miller is 100% focused on learning environments. So where Aimee's firm is covering a lot of ground, we're very focused on one type of project, and that allows me to have a very unique role. I'm the firm's educational design director. And so although I'm a licensed architect and did architecture for a lot of years, I actually work really heavily with educators now. And my focus is on connecting with educators early and understanding what learning should look and feel like, and then incorporating that into our projects. And so this connection is really important to me. So I'm actually going back to school again right now, and I'm working on a doctorate in educational leadership. So my world is in education, but I have had all of that training on the architecture side.
Wonderful. Thank you, Michelle. So one of our first questions for you guys, if you guys can kind of just talk about what does your day-to-day look like? I know lots of days can be very different, but on a normal day, like what would your responsibility and tasks be?
You want to go ahead, Michelle?
Go ahead and give them the boots on the ground architecture view first, because I think that's probably the most realistic. So do that.
I was going to say, I would say there is no typical day for me. I mean, every day is very different. I worked in firms as kind of a managing project architect for years, and that was a lot of sitting behind of a computer and going to meetings. But now my days are very different. I mean, I'm going to a variety of different projects. I usually visit with at least one or two clients at their property every day. So I'm off-site quite a bit. Then I'm writing proposals when I come back from that. I'm managing my staff that really do most of the production. Hopefully I get to design a little bit here and there, but again, like Michelle said, you kind of get further away from that kind of the longer you're working, you get it more into a management role. So I do some of that. So I still get in Revit. I still do some design here and there, but most of my day is reviewing other folks' work. There's called the red line process in architecture, where you draw it and someone red lines it and then you fix it and then they red line it again. And so I do a lot of that back and forth process, as well as interaction with the clients, doing construction administration. I do the majority of the on-site construction review for our projects that are there. And then I'm also involved in several non-for-profit organizations. So I'm away from the office going to board meetings. We have our board retreat tonight for our Missouri Main Street organization that we have here in Liberty. And I probably spend on average 4 to 10 hours a week with that organization, just purely volunteering under one of my passions. So my day is completely varied. We work a 4-day work week in our office. So we work 4 10-hour days, Monday through Thursday. So that's really great. We all have a 3-day weekend every week. So we started that this year after kind of doing some research and study about quality of life and happiness of employees and work-life balance and all of those things. And so we are constantly kind of challenging the norms. What works for us, what works for other people may be different. So my day is constantly changing, and I try to keep notes as to how to stay organized, lots of different ways to do that. But yeah, there's a huge variety in what I do. But a typical architect, until you kind of get up into the leadership, you're going to spend a lot of your time designing, whether that's in 3-dimensional software, doing initial hand sketching, things like that, and really focusing on the day-to-day details of the project.
Yeah, I think the only other thing I'd add is that, you know, when I first got out of school, I think there was it's a very different experience working than when you're in school. And so you're translating design ideas into how it fits into the real world. You know, you have budgets to worry about and construction schedules and all of these things. And one of the really important parts of being a young designer is being able to work with other people. In our office, we have so many people, and we have a really integrated approach. So we have a ton of different people that come together to create projects in my world, where we have structural engineers that are in-house, we have architects in-house, we have interior designers and interior architects, we have people that work on the graphics side. And so it's really important that they're able to come together and collectively share ideas from the very first time that we start talking about a project, because good ideas can come from anybody. And so it's important to leverage that. You know, as I transitioned out of, when I was first out of school, I was a supportive role on a team. Just like Aimee said, you're doing a lot of drawing and drafting and sketching and just really ideating and coming up with cool ideas. And then as you start to lead projects, you're really starting to widen your lens of what you need to worry about: city submittals and codes and all kinds of things that are much more related to keeping a project safe, on time, on budget, all of those things. So you start to get to a bigger picture. And then I had eventually transitioned to leading teams of people working on projects. So I was connecting really heavily with clients. I was a client leader for several years, where I would maintain those client relationships and sort of transition that to the project teams, keeping a high level overview of a lot of different projects. And then my job now is probably 50% of my time is spent running the company and talking about all kinds of businessy things that I never learned in school, that you figure out as you go. And then the other side, the education side, I spend my time probably about half of the time on research. We're a very research-driven firm, so how we're applying ideas about how the brain works, how people learn, things like that to our practice, and then connecting with clients to talk about their specific needs, and then supporting our team internally. So if a client says, we're really excited about this type of learning, we want to make sure that the environment is a supportive tool for that. So truly, architecture design is such a opportunity to find your niche, I think, depending on what you really love to do. And I've had the opportunity to explore a lot of different things and find a really specific niche.
So Kaylin had a question, and I know that I saw that Michelle briefly touched on this, but her question was, do architects only focus on the looks or the aesthetics, or do they also, work on the function and safety of the project, which I believe it's probably all encompassing, but Aimee, would you like to go into some more detail about that?
Sure, that was actually a point I was going to make after listening to Michelle. I think one thing to understand about the role of the architect in a design project is we are kind of we are the communicator and the coordinator. We kind of jokingly say engineers kind of speak a different language, so you don't necessarily want the engineers talking to the client. They don't speak the same language. It's not to keep anything from anyone, but someone has to be the person that can communicate back and forth. So we have to be able to speak all of those languages. We have to be able to understand the engineering, not do their job for them, but understanding what they're talking about and communicating back and forth. And then really we're involved in all aspects of that project. I mean, aesthetically, what it looks like is typically our decision in coordination with the client. Lots of times the client's going to rely on us because they understand they're not designers and they just need someone to help them execute their functional needs. But it's down to the nitty gritty. I mean, architects get into the nitty gritty of handicap accessibility, and there's lots of fun parts of the project, picking finishes, doing the renderings, deciding what the building is going to look like, or the renovation, whatever it may be. But then there's a lot of nuts and bolts. There's the structural design. There's the kind of unsexy part of writing specifications and determining all the kind of nuts and bolts that make a project to go together. So it's a very technical job while still being artistic. For me, that was always a great merging. I was highly on the art, but then also highly on math and sciences. And I always say it's real art. It's buildable art, what we do. It's constructed. We have a product at the end of the day that not only has to be beautiful, but it has to work. If it's good architecture, at least. So it's all of those things, fortunately and unfortunately, right? Sometimes it would be fun to just do the pretty pictures, but you also have to figure out how to make those pretty pictures stand up.
Michelle, do you have anything to add?
No, she's spot on. I mean, every job comes with things that you love to do and things that you don't love to do. And there's plenty of that in the world of architecture. I think what makes a really successful person later in the career is you gave yourself the chance to try all of the things, even the things that you didn't think you would like to do, because it's a really important part of understanding the sum of the parts. And you're a better designer if you know how something goes together, because if it's hard to draw, it is hard to build generally. So those tough parts are learning moments too.
One of our questions was, starting out in high school, if you're interested in architecture, what are some really good classes for these students to take, or even looking at college classes, VOTEC classes? What's important if you're interested in architecture and possibly want to pursue a career in architecture?
Go ahead, Michelle, because I went to a small private school that had no offerings. So I literally hadn't even had an art class when I went to architecture school. So.
I was going to say, this is probably an unfair question for both of us, because I have no idea what they even offer in some of the support of these things now. I will admit, I also got into architecture because I enjoyed art, but I felt like it was a very practical version of art. I wish that I was a better artist in the sense of hand sketching and watercoloring. I think I've seen so many truly gifted people in the world of design that can express their ideas quickly through drawing, just with pen to paper, and you become this storyteller through your art. And so I think any kind of class that allows you to explore what kind of an artist you might be. And it doesn't mean you have to be, you know, the most gifted artist of all time. I will tell you, I am not the most gifted artist of all time. And I did perfectly well through architecture school. So I think those classes are important. I think one of the misconceptions about architects is people assume you make tons of money and you have to be very good at math. But the being really good at math part is more of understanding from a geometry perspective and a spatial perspective. So it's not, I have to be really good at calculus. It's, I need to understand how parts create a whole. And so I think you don't have to worry if you're not wonderful at math either. But, you know, I took classes at that time, it was AutoCAD. I know they're teaching three-dimensional design classes now. Anything you can get your hands on early is just going to make the learning curve in your next school step feel a little less scary. Architecture school is notoriously difficult, and it truly is a test of grit. Can you keep going and put your head down and keep going? And so anything like that where you have some skills going in, so you're not trying to learn how to be a college student, learn how to learn a program, learn how to design all at the same time, just takes a little stress away.
I do know a little bit about the programs they have at Liberty North. Obviously the Revit and the SketchUp classes are great. I also think another one that would be really practical is the aviation class, because I think because you build an airplane in that, that's very applicable to what we do. I mean,
that's a great idea.
You're building a structure and you're learning nuts and bolts. And then I think anything, like she said, art related, drawing related, if they have any type of color theory, I know they're offering all of those things to students. That just gives you a leg up, because the struggle for me with not having any of that in high school, while I had advanced physics and math and those things, is I couldn't draw by hand very well when I got there. And like she said, you don't have to be an amazing artist to go in. They're going to teach you those things. But the frustrating part for me was I was always used to being number one, and I wasn't number one anymore. When I didn't have those skill sets, which was a good lesson for me too. I mean, don't get me wrong. Took me down a notch a little bit to not be the best in the class, but you learn those things. Like she's saying, you don't have to feel like I need to be an amazing artist to be an architect, because drafting, those are skills that you can learn. The natural talent goes a long way too, don't get me wrong, but it's not a requirement.
Do you all recommend like job shadowing internships? Have you guys had any, you know, those type of positions within your offices? Did you guys do that coming into the industry? Any advice on those type of programs to get more hands-on experience as a young person?
I personally did not. I didn't intern at all. I got a job out of college and started working. I had shadowed at maybe 2 different firms. I think it's a very different education. You can tell the students that go and start interning after their 3rd or 4th year, they become much more practical, as opposed to the students that don't, that are still, you know, kind of pie in the sky, big dreams, not thinking about the reality of architecture. That has its pros and cons to me. There was kind of something nice about being in that bubble of the real world hadn't hit me yet, but then it hits you kind of hard when you don't have any of that behind you. But I mean, we have an intern now. We always have an intern. We've had CAPS interns. We've had college interns in the past. We typically have anywhere from 4 to 8 kids come shadow throughout the year. Our office is always open for folks. We do stuff with the Girl Scouts, kind of on the lower age range. So all of those things are super important. Like, I don't know how you could, I mean, I picked a career without really knowing what it was, and I got lucky, but a lot of people don't. So go and find out what the job really is before you sign up for the college bill.
Yeah, I did that in high school. I was the equivalent of like a clerk. I wouldn't even call myself an intern. I found a very small 2-person firm. They did residential. I just wanted to see, like, peek behind the curtain a little bit. And I ended up working there for 2 years, and I earned my way to actually like helping with real stuff. It wasn't just, you know, making copies and prints. And it just gave me an idea of what that really small firm experience would be like. When I was in school, I chose to do a long internship instead of studying abroad. And so I did 9 months at my 4th year at a large firm downtown. And I worked on a full project for 9 months, and it gave me the opportunity to see the scale of that firm and what that experience would be like. Ironically, I decided after that I didn't want to work for a big firm downtown. And so Hollis Miller in the last 15 years has become a big firm downtown. So it's just funny how things change. But it is so different than school that I do think it is a good thing to get an idea of what the job part is, because school passes and the job part stays. So that's a really good experience. We have an emerging professionals program where we have we slot in people from all over the country to an internship program. Depends on how well prepared they are, but typically they're third or fourth year, and sometimes even come back twice. But we have a program where we build it's a charitable thing that we do once a year. We build an outdoor learning classroom for a school district. And what it allows those interns to do is see the full duration of a project and really own that with the support of a designer. And so they're flexing those muscles that they're learning in school before it's like the real deal of getting a job. And then they actually get to help. We shut our office down for 2 days and we build this, because it's a good reminder to all of our architects that if it's hard to draw, it's hard to build. And so we have practice in doing that as well. But I think any opportunity to just soak up your job the first couple years out of school anyway is to just be a sponge and just soak it all in. So any attempt you can make to soak it all in, to get a feel for what it might be like for a career, is great.
One of the questions was, what are the certificates or requirements for an architect?
Go ahead, Amy.
Okay. Well, you can still, I believe, get either a bachelor's or a master's, although predominantly programs are a master's degree, which is a 5-year degree. Things have changed a little bit, probably since Michelle and I got our licenses, but I do have a new young architect, so I'm a little more familiar with that process now. It used to be that you did a 3-year internship after you graduated with an accredited degree. So that's an important thing when you look at colleges, to make sure that the degree you would be getting is an accredited degree. And I don't know how many architecture programs there are out there that are not accredited, but that's very important for your licensure. Now I believe you can start taking your exams essentially straight out of school, which would have been nice, rather than taking a 3-year break from like structures and things like that, which aren't really a huge part of our day-to-day job. So you kind of do that internship, you log hours during that time, and those hours have to be in different categories of the project, whether that's, schematic design or construction documents or oversight. You have to earn a certain amount of hours in each of those categories, and then you're qualified, or now in combination, there's 7, I believe, licensing exams that you have to take and pass, which are 3 to 5 hour tests. I would guess there's still all of that now. Way back in the day, probably before either of our time, they used to go down to the Lake of the Ozarks and take a 2 or 3 day long test, and you packed all of those things into one. But now they're you go to a testing center and you kind of take the testing, and typically doing the studying kind of on your own. At larger firms, they may have study groups or study resources, but I know at a lot of firms, it's on your own to study and take your tests. And then once you've passed all of those 7 exams, you receive a stamp for the state, a licensure and a stamp for the state that you were tested in. And then we have what's called NCARB, which is the National Architectural Registration Board. And if you maintain an account through them, you can get reciprocity and become licensed in other states, essentially just by paying their fees. There's a few exceptions to that. Some states have additional requirements, like California for seismic, and I believe there's an additional test that I would have to take in order to be licensed in California, which I am not. And I think there may be Alaska may also have a similar requirement for that. And that's for your architectural stamp.
So that is really important. If you, like at my firm, the only people that stamp drawings are the partners. It's a thing of responsibility and legal issues more than anything. Other smaller firms, other people may stamp their own drawings. It's something that we highly encourage, because it is a commitment to your education and your practice. Like if if you want to, you don't have to do it if you want to work at a firm that has a lot of support in that area, but it's just a great way to demonstrate that you're committed to doing this. So it's a series of tests and you have to study a lot, but it can be done. We've both done it, so it can be done. But it is something that you start to work on after you get out of college.
Does your industry, are you required to have continuing education? So like in the building industry, you know, to be a licensed, to have your contracting license, you have to do so many hours every year. Is that similar for architects?
Yeah, you do. You have to maintain those continuing education credits so that they know that your license is still valid. You don't have to retake those tests, but you do have to prove that you have stayed current with what you know about the profession. So those hours get logged.
And those each state, sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
Each state has different requirements. Initially, I was only licensed in one state, so that was fairly simple, but now being licensed in multiple states, every state has a little bit different requirement, whether they're standard, what we call CEUs, continuing education units, or LU learning units. Some of those are what we call HSWs, which are health, safety, and welfare. And so those are courses that are really focused on the health, safety, and welfare of the people we're designing buildings for. But there's also learning units out there of what are the trendy colors, you know, through Sherwin-Williams, or what's a new product here and there. So there's a variety of those, and different states have different requirements for those. So it's something you definitely have to stay up on. And it can be kind of tedious. I usually find myself taking several courses a week before my license is due, but it is an important part of what we do. I don't believe that's a requirement until you become licensed. I don't think while you're in your internship portion that's
required. I don't think so either.
So we've had several questions regarding interior design. And so can you guys kind of just touch on, you know, the differences between architectural design and interior design? You know, do they overlap? Do you all have interior designers that work at architectural firms? Kind of encompassing several questions into one.
We actually have the greatest number of interior staff in the city, and it's something that we're really proud of. We are almost 50% architects and 50% interiors focus, and that interiors focus comes in two different degrees. There's an interior architecture degree, and then there's an interior design degree, and there are some nuances, little differences between the two. We have both, and both actually fill the same role in the case of Hollis Miller. We work with our interior staff a little bit differently than I know some other firms do across the city. It probably looks different in every firm, but for us, they are an integrated member of that team from the very first day. And they are far more than choosing colors or carpet. They are actually involved in creating the look and the feel of the space. And so in our mind, they are as valued, have the same experiences as an architect. There are differences in the training. And so where an architect would be probably more focused, not more focused, but also focused on, we call it the envelope, the outside of the building, all of the parts and pieces that keep it watertight and some of the boring stuff, honestly. And interiors focused person doesn't have quite the same type of training in that area. And so they're more focused on the look and the feel and the experience of the space inside. But we need both to do really great design for sure.
I'm not teaching anymore, but I did teach at Park University in the interior design department for several years as an architect. So I would just say kind of the contrasting, typically interior design is a 4-year degree rather than a 5-year degree. You don't have the ability to become licensed in most states, although there are some, like Oklahoma actually has a license for interior designers, which I think is great because I think especially for tenant finish work, anything that doesn't involve structural, then interior designers can really do a lot. In my office, I would say we're pretty unique. Kind of interestingly, we are half interior designers, half architects, but that's only a total of 4 people. So that's not a large number. But we kind of jokingly call the interior designers that work here architect light because they design homes from scratch. I mean, they're doing the structural framing, they're designing the entire home, as well as then selecting finishes, doing tenant finish work, which would be kind of more of a interior architect slash interior designer role. And I've worked at firms where they've kind of treated it differently. When I worked at WSKF, the interior designers there definitely were basically performing the same role as the architects. Like she said, the education is a little different. They don't take any of the structural courses or the physics courses or a light version of building construction systems, which is just a very general knowledge of kind of how framing goes together, but much more focused on color, materials, scale, different things like that. But I completely agree. They're an equally valuable role to the architect. But just the education and the certification process is a little bit different.
Okay, a couple more questions. We've got about 5 to 6 minutes left before we have to end this. But so kind of encompassing a couple of other questions, how long is a normal project from like start to finish? I know that it very much varies. So maybe talk about a couple of different projects, you know, residential, commercial, kind of what that looks like timeline-wise.
Go ahead, Michelle, I'll let you describe a big project.
Yeah, ours are, well, and we do all kinds of different scales of projects. We might have a very small renovation project that honestly we can be, there's several phases of design. And so I think that's an important thing to acknowledge. There are phases of design that start with programming and schematic design, which are just the very big picture ideas. When we get into design development, we're really starting to make all the design decisions about the look and the feel. Construction documents are where we sit down and put our head down and put on paper how a contractor will actually build that project. And then there's the whole chunk of time afterwards that the architect is still involved during construction administration. And that's what Aimee talked about earlier about visiting job sites and putting that hard hat on and looking at things that are in the process of being built and making sure that they meet the requirements that you put in the drawings. For us, you know, we could build, let's just say a new elementary school might cost, you know, $28 million, something like that. That design process, the one where we're coming up with the idea all the way to putting the lines on the paper for the contractor, that might be 9 months. And then it takes another 12 to 14 months to actually build it. So depending on how the person stays involved during construction, they could be on the same project for well over a year, almost 2 years. We have very small things that we need to get done too, and those might only be a several week effort of design. And then it might be something that we just build over the summer when kids are out of school. So the scale and the commitment shifts dramatically at a larger firm than even where I'm at, like a firm that does large sports arenas or really big projects that go on several years. You may stay involved in the same project for quite some time. So I'm sure Aimee sees a vast difference too on the scale.
When I worked for other people, definitely I had some projects that were, 3 to 5 years. Historic renovation projects can take a really long time if state and federal historic tax credits are involved. And that's a lot of stopping and starting. You might do your kind of preliminary part and then you wait 18 months for the state to approve your application and then you get back started again. But for us, just a couple of different project types that we would typically hit. So say it's a new residence. So someone has a piece of property, we're going to design that home from scratch. That could get done as quickly as 3 weeks. And then usually it takes a couple of months, kind of with back and forth, getting the design all flushed out. And then construction would be anywhere from, 6 months to a year. Sometimes we oversee during construction in homes and sometimes we don't. It's just a variety of options. Some projects could be as simple as a day, like a tenant fit, like a test fit for a tenant finish. You might get a footprint and you've got to lay out a space in there in just a few hours to see what would work for them. They may do that 5 or 6 times before they pick a building that they're going to go into. But some of those smaller projects could easily be done in a week or 2. For me, I did not love being on projects for years and years. I kind of like to start something, get it done, and move on to the next one. But there's a huge variety. Like she said, some of these stadium projects, I mean, people are literally detailing those projects for years and years before they even start building them. So lots of different niches, kind of depends on your attention span. It's also why I'm a generalist. I never enjoyed, when I worked for other firms, I did so many banks that I was like, I never need to touch it. Banks and surgery centers. And I was like, I never need to do another one of those again in my entire life. So I like that all of our projects are different. But it doesn't make us a specialist in the way that Hollis and Miller is. But there's niches for all of these types of architects.
So like one last question, and like I said, we only have a couple of minutes, so 30-second answers, but like, how has it changed? Like, are you still doing pencil and paper design, or is it, you know, mostly digital at this point? Like what type of materials do you use when you're designing a project?
Variety of things for me. I mean, we produce most everything in Revit. So predominantly we are designing in the computer, just in different ways. Kind of used to use a variety of SketchUp and Revit, but I would say we're pretty much in Revit now. And lots of times I'll kind of get a footprint and then I'll print those things out and by hand make changes and revisions kind of quickly. But yeah, it's predominantly in the computer at this point.
Yeah, early ideas can be pencil and paper to just brainstorm, and then we've been 100% in Revit for 17 years now, and there have been some wonderful opportunities with that program to experience things in 3D and do walkthroughs, and it's just a great tool.
Wonderful. Well, that's all the time we have today, but thank you so much, Aimee and Michelle, for taking the time to share your experiences and your insight. I hope the audience enjoyed hearing about one of the many career opportunities that are here right in Kansas City. Please make sure to take a minute or two to complete the survey that will pop up on your screen after this session ends. This will help us improve this event for the future. And to find out any more information on any of the topics that we discussed today, you can visit our website, nebaworkskc.org. Sorry. But thank you, everyone, and I hope you have a great rest of the day.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, guys.